When someone has been through too much, exhaustion settles deep in the psyche. This is not the tiredness that sleep can fix, but a weariness that forms after years of emotional demand, disappointment, and survival. Over time, the mind adapts by becoming quieter. Words feel unnecessary. Reactions soften. What appears from the outside as withdrawal or indifference is often the result of a nervous system that has learned restraint. They have already spent too much energy explaining, hoping, and enduring. Silence becomes efficiency. This quiet is not emptiness. It is concentration. When the psyche has carried prolonged weight, it learns to conserve itself. Emotion is no longer wasted on what cannot be changed or on people who have proven unreliable. Instead, strength moves inward. It becomes measured, grounded, and deliberate. These individuals do not react impulsively because they have already seen where unchecked emotion leads. They have learned that endurance is not loud. It does not demand recognition. It simply persists. In Jungian terms, this is the ego learning to step aside so the deeper self can survive. The person does not become weaker. They become contained. And containment is power. If you recognize this quiet strength in yourself, understand this: your silence is not absence. It is the sound of wisdom choosing where to stand. After enduring repeated disappointment or emotional injury, the psyche does something remarkably intelligent. It builds distance. Detachment is often misunderstood as coldness or lack of feeling. But psychologically, it is a boundary formed through experience. When closeness has repeatedly led to pain, the unconscious learns to slow attachment, to observe before it trusts, to hold back before it gives. This is not avoidance for its own sake. It is discernment shaped by consequence. People who have gone through too much no longer rush into emotional intimacy. They have learned that not everyone who approaches with warmth arrives with care. As a result, they watch patterns rather than promises. They listen more than they speak. Their reserve is not fear. It is memory. The mind remembers what the heart once ignored. In Jungian psychology, this is the shadow informing the conscious self. Past wounds become teachers, refining perception rather than hardening the soul. Healthy detachment allows the individual to remain present without being consumed. It creates space to choose relationships consciously, instead of reliving old injuries unconsciously. The danger is not detachment itself, but forgetting why it exists. When used wisely, it protects without isolating. The question is not whether you should let people in, but whether you are choosing connection or simply repeating history. When a person has endured prolonged emotional strain, awareness sharpens. Suffering has a way of training perception. Those who have been through too much often notice shifts in tone, pauses in speech, and contradictions between words and behavior that others overlook. This is not suspicion, it is adaptation. The psyche learns to read beneath the surface, because, in the past, what was hidden mattered more than what was said. Psychologically, this heightened sensitivity develops when safety is uncertain. The unconscious begins scanning for patterns, seeking meaning before threat has time to appear. Over time, this becomes an intuitive intelligence. These individuals are rarely surprised by human behavior, not because they expect the worst, but because they have already studied it under pressure. They understand that people reveal themselves slowly and consistently, not through declarations, but through repetition. In Jungian terms, this is the integration of experience into insight. Pain refines perception. The mind becomes less idealistic and more accurate. However, this awareness carries responsibility. When perception is sharp, one must resist the temptation to withdraw entirely or judge prematurely. Insight should lead to clarity, not cynicism. Used well, this awareness becomes wisdom. It allows one to engage with the world without illusion, yet without bitterness. If you have learned to see clearly, the task is not to close your eyes again, but to choose what deserves your attention. After enough inner turbulence, priorities change. People who have gone through too much stop chasing approval because they understand the cost of noise. Validation once promised safety, belonging, or worth, but experience revealed how fragile and temporary it is. Over time, the psyche redirects its energy away from being seen and toward being stable. Peace becomes more valuable than praise. This is why such individuals often appear uninterested in arguments, status, or social performance. They have already lived through emotional chaos and know how quickly it drains the soul. What they seek now is internal order. They choose environments, conversations, and relationships that do not disturb their inner balance. Anything that repeatedly provokes anxiety, confusion, or self-betrayal is quietly released without drama or justification. In psychological terms, this is maturity. The ego no longer needs constant confirmation from the outside, because the self has learned to regulate from within. Jung spoke of individuation as the movement toward wholeness, and this preference for peace is a sign of that movement. The person is no longer fragmented by external expectations. Yet peace is not passivity. It is an active choice made every day to disengage from what diminishes and to remain aligned with what sustains. If you no longer chase validation, ask yourself this: are you protecting your peace? Or are you finally honoring it? Resilience in those who have gone through too much is often misunderstood. It is not optimism, and it is not blind strength. It is the result of repeated loss forcing adaptation. Each disappointment demanded adjustment. Each betrayal required reorientation. Over time, the psyche learned how to bend without breaking, not because it wanted to, but because survival required it. This kind of resilience is quiet and unsentimental. It does not announce itself or seek admiration. In fact, it often looks like emotional restraint. What appears to be numbness is frequently discernment. The understanding that not every wound deserves a reaction. These individuals have already felt extremes. They know which pains transform and which merely drain. From a Jungian perspective, resilience forms when suffering is metabolized rather than denied. The shadow is not avoided, it is integrated. Pain becomes information. Loss becomes structure. The personality reorganizes itself around what has proven essential. This is why people shaped by adversity often possess a grounded realism. They no longer chase fantasies of perfection. They respect limits, both their own and others. Yet resilience is not the end of the journey. If it remains only a defense, it can harden into isolation. Its deeper purpose is to create stability from which life can be re-entered with clarity. Your resilience was forged in fire, but its true power lies in what you choose to build with it now. After enduring enough pain, a crucial question eventually emerges. What was this all for? Suffering that remains unexplored tends to repeat itself, but suffering that is understood begins to transform. Those who have gone through too much reach a point where mere endurance is no longer enough. Survival without meaning becomes its own form of exhaustion. This is where healing truly begins. In Jungian psychology, pain becomes bearable when it is integrated into the psyche rather than resisted. The individual stops trying to erase the past and instead allows it to inform the present. Trauma, when examined honestly, reveals patterns, values, and inner strengths that were previously unconscious. Meaning does not remove the pain, but it changes one's relationship to it. What once felt like chaos becomes context. This process does not require grand explanations or spiritual bypassing. It requires courage, the willingness to look inward and ask how suffering reshaped perception, boundaries, and purpose. When meaning is found, the individual is no longer defined by what happened to them, but by how it was metabolized into awareness. Healing, then, is not forgetting. It is remembering differently. It is choosing to let experience deepen rather than diminish the self. Your past does not demand your silence or your shame. It asks for understanding. And understanding is where transformation begins.